Okay, let's try this again. Um, Recorded this yesterday and apparently it didn't actually record, so we're going to start over. So, we're finally back. It is now day 16 of me in quarantine, so I'm starting to get a little crazy already, but um, we're going to finally get back to actual material going forward. So, first of all, both Chapter 12 and Chapter 13 are due this week, so remember to do both of your quizzes. I've updated the syllabus to fix the extra week of spring break that we had that just compacts 2 of the weeks at the end of the semester. So be aware of that. Hopefully by that point I'm back on campus, but I highly doubt it. We'll probably finish the rest of the semester online, but that doesn't impact you guys at all. Here's a video from last week tonight that aired on Sunday that does a pretty good job summing up all the news in the with coronavirus. Yeah, that's basically it. I'm going to go a little faster this time so I can get both chapters recorded today and hopefully uploaded. This video does have some profanity in it. It's a last week tonight video. You should know what you're getting with that. But it does a pretty good job of summing up the last 2 weeks of news. Okay, so we're talking about the presidency today. Presidency is written down in the Article 2 of the Constitution. It's broadly worded, giving the president powers. And we've expanded upon those powers over time, making them bigger than they were at the beginning of our country. So the president has more powers now, doesn't need to go to Congress as much as they used to get the ability to go into combat. The president and the executive have far more foreign policy initiatives dealing with foreign countries. Congress has very little say when it comes to foreign policy now. And then broad executive powers. The bureaucracy under the president has expanded dramatically, giving them more sway when it comes to policy in the country. And the president has far more legislative impact than he used to, using a veto as an ability to deter policies that the president disagrees with, versus just vetoing things that the president believes to be unconstitutional. So, the president has 2 ways of claiming national policy authority. First of which is the president is the only political leader in the country that has been voted on by every single person in the country, which gives, for the majority of elections, the authority of the majority going in. We've had presidents like President Trump who didn't get the popular vote, but was still elected, so they don't exactly have the premise of majority backing of the country in general. But for the most part, presidents, when they come in, they have this push of the public saying that this is what the public wants. And they're a single authority for the most part. The executive, when we get further down, is a little more murky, but the president is directly impacted politically by everything that goes on. So we have 2 kind of historical ideas of what the president should be. Originally, we have the Whig theory that the president should be just carrying out the will of Congress, a rubber stamp for Congress for the most part. And then with Teddy Roosevelt, we get the stewardship theory, that the president is only prohibited by what the Constitution says, and builds towards a much stronger president than historically before Teddy Roosevelt. So there's been a growing need for a stronger president with the more global role the United States has taken. The need of a president to have more domestic policy leadership when it comes to major issues as well. the president is usually if not the leader of idea, but a major opponent of it. Very rarely will a president sit by when it comes to a policy that's being discussed on the national level. And then with foreign policy, ever since World War II, we've had the president being the chief negotiator of the United States, because they can act much faster than Congress can do anything. So we've seen presidents have quickly overcome, and most military engagements now are authorized by the president. Very rarely does it go to Congress or NATO or the UN in any case for the United States. So when it comes to choosing a president, we have a long electoral process that you guys are all aware of. The founders were afraid of a powerful populist president, so they set up the Electoral College to be indirect. This means that despite what the people want, if they fear a powerful president coming in, a powerful president against the cemented elite that the founders were, then the Electoral College could choose a more reasonable candidate. This has not happened in modern era when we've now had direct elections. The Electoral College is pretty much a rubber stamp on how the individual states vote. We'll talk a lot more about the Electoral College in maybe it's an exam question, because it's not a discussion post for you guys, but we'll discuss the Electoral College in more detail later, or I'll allow you guys to voice your opinions about it. Now that we've had more direct elections and primaries, the public role has become more direct in connecting to the president. We finally had open party caucuses and primaries now that opened up who each state's delegates would vote for. Through time, we've had different methods of different groups of choosers of who the candidate should be, from the original of just the Electoral College meeting and deciding, to the party conventions who then choose the delegates to go to the Electoral College, to party primaries and caucuses, which are now almost all primaries, that are chosen by the majority of the party members in that state. So, in the primaries, you have to nominate candidates for each party. That starts in this invisible primary. If you guys remember last year, we had over 20 candidates running on the Democratic side to be the Democratic candidate. That started basically right after the 2018 election was over. That slow process that weeded out a majority of them. I think we were down to less than 10 by the time Iowa happened. We have primaries and we have caucuses. The first primary is New Hampshire. First caucus is Iowa. That could possibly change in 2024 with how badly the Iowa caucuses were this year. They were just a complete crap show of not knowing anything, the apps failing, voters' votes not getting counted correctly. So we could see a move away from Iowa being first. Not to mention the demographics of Iowa and New Hampshire don't represent the majority of the country. And momentum is so key in presidential elections. Winning New Hampshire or Iowa is a dramatic boost for a candidate. Prior to Biden this year, Bill Clinton was the only party candidate that didn't win Iowa and New Hampshire that won the candidacy. Joe Biden, who is looking most likely to be the candidate for the Democrats this time around, did not win Iowa or New Hampshire. However, if Bernie Sanders somehow wins, he won New Hampshire and won the popular vote in Iowa, but the odds of him becoming the nominee are basically zero at this point. And money is so crucial at this time. Another weird thing about Joe Biden is he had no money. he still doesn't have a lot of money. He's starting to get more now that candidates are out of the race. But um, up until Super Tuesday, Joe Biden was broke and still won. It was a strange election in that case. But being able to gather money and fundraise is key to being able to get airtime, get your name out there, get support with voters, and get people to actually turn out. So after the long primary process, we have the national party conventions. We probably won't, possibly won't have like in-person party conventions this time around because of the coronavirus, but usually in the summer prior to the election, both parties hold a convention. I'm not sure where the Republicans are holding theirs or supposed to be holding theirs. I know the Democrats are in Wisconsin and Milwaukee. I'm sure if they're smart, the Republicans will have theirs in the Midwest as well. This is where all of the primary delegates come together and vote to who their presidential candidate will be. This is usually decided way before this, especially in modern elections. We know who the candidate is going to be. Usually the presidential candidate has already brought or chosen their VP candidate, but this is also the first time the VP candidate is really getting a lot of notoriety with their speech as well. This is where the party picks the platform. There'll be a lot of negotiations. Biden's side will probably make some concessions to Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren supporters for more liberal ideas in certain areas such as education and healthcare. He probably will move towards a closer to, he's already talked about relieving student loan debt and having free community college, but he could also work towards having a public option with his expansion of Obamacare that he's discussed. This is all an attempt to heal the wounds and bring the party together. This was a major problem with the Democrats in 2016 with Bernie and Hillary, is it took a lot longer and a lot of hurt feelings were had over the primary, and it took a while for Bernie Sanders to come into the fold, and he didn't do a great job of keeping his supporters in line and voting for Hillary in 2016. That was a big issue. I was in Michigan that summer, and in Ann Arbor, Michigan, University of Michigan's there, right across the street from the house that I lived in, because I lived in a co-op with 20 other people. That was insane for 2 months. There's this giant rock that they spray paint. People are constantly spray painting it with art and then covering it up like a week later. And there were multiple times it was spray painted Bernie voters for Trump in Ann Arbor, of moving the furthest left people in the Democratic Party that support Bernie, voting for Trump to overthrow the system and hoping that Trump will make things so bad that people will move towards Bernie. Not exactly the smartest voting decision or the most logical voting decision in my opinion, but hey, that's their right, I guess. Doesn't really fit with a lot of political theory that people should vote that way. Logically, you should vote for who you agree with the most and not purposely voting because you view a candidate to be so detrimental that it will allow you to win in the future. That's not exactly logical voting, but it's interesting nonetheless that people did that in 2016. Off topic, this is one of the first times the party is presenting the candidate as their candidate. You will notice that this is when they get the big coffers of money from the party as well. The party will finally start pushing for Joe Biden after the party convention, and it's thoroughly decided he won't get the giant piles of money that the party has until then. So now we get to the general election after the party conventions are over. Both candidates have their partisan voters that are in the tank. Trump has his solid 35% that will never leave him voting for him. He doesn't have to keep them. The main goal of the general election is more move towards the middle to pick up moderate voters and pick up that majority of 270 electoral college voters. Almost all states have a unit rule when it comes to the electoral college. So if you win 51% in California, you get all 55 delegates from California versus only getting 28 delegates. You would actually get the whole lot. This is how Hillary Clinton won the popular vote but lost the electoral college. She heavily won in blue states and narrowly lost in the Midwest. So she lost all of those delegates, but in a very close election. So that's how she won the popular but lost the electoral college. There are a few states that don't have the unit rule. Nebraska and Maine have theirs split up to where they have 2 statewide delegates that fit with their senators, and then they have congressional district delegates. And so they don't have every congressional district doesn't go for the same candidate in those states. Nebraska, usually they all go red. Maine, there's a chance of picking up a Democrat or a Republican delegate in Maine. And candidates are going to focus on those battleground states. You're going to see a lot of Trump and Biden focusing on Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Minnesota. Biden will probably fight to try and pick up Arizona and Georgia as well. North Carolina and Virginia will be big areas that they'll fight for as well. But they'll spend the majority of their time in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Ohio, in Wisconsin, and Minnesota, because those are the states that will actually decide the election. Biden will go to California to get money from donors, and Trump will go to, I guess Texas is a big donor state for him. They're going to have to spend a lot of money on ads. If you guys remembered the primary and how many Bloomberg ads you saw on YouTube and Facebook, that's going to get worse in the primary. It's not going to get as bad for us here as it is going to be in the Midwest, but it's going to be constant. Trump has gathered hundreds of millions of dollars over the last 3 years that he hasn't spent. That will be used heavily to keep him in office. So the ads are going to keep coming, especially in July, September, November. And they'll have a lot more internet funding. If you donate once to any candidate, your entire email box is going to be overloaded with emails from them constantly until the end of November. And constitutional requirements, besides being able to gather all this money, win all these things, you still have to be 35 and a natural born citizen and be a resident for 14 years. Both Trump and Biden and Bernie, if he somehow wins handily, have that 35 years old. All 3 of them double that. They're all 3 in their 70s, so they definitely meet that requirement. So, unit rule, we talked about this. You can see those purple states are the ones that you're going to focus on. Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, I would say it'd be pretty blue now. Florida can still be considered purple. It's moving red. The Midwest is all up for grabs, minus Illinois and Indiana. Virginia and North Carolina. Virginia is moving pretty blue, especially with all of the DC suburbs. Trump might have a chance in New Hampshire. He was close in New Hampshire with Hillary, and Maine too, but for the most part, those Midwest purple states are what's going to decide the election. Let's see. So here's all the past careers for presidents since Teddy Roosevelt. You can see almost all of them, well, all of them besides Trump had a previous position in the federal government. Eisenhower being the only non-executive. He was a general, but he was still a part of the executive. Yeah, so Trump is definitely an outlier when it comes to the path of how to become president. You usually have to pay your dues as a senator or governor, and then vice president in some cases, before getting elected. So once you're elected, then you have to worry about filling out your cabinet and the rest of the executive. You have to appoint all of the cabinet leaders, FBI director, most major bureaucratic offices. You're going to have to nominate the executives of those branches. This is how the president can extend authority throughout the bureaucracy. Replacing all of the heads of the branches can definitely change the political culture and all of those to fit to the more of the president's desires. You're going to pick party loyalists, but not just party loyalists, but loyalists to the president. This is why with Trump, you saw a lot of strange choices for his cabinets, particularly because a lot of party elites during the primary didn't back Trump early. Very few elected officials in D.C. Put their support behind him until he started winning. So you didn't see a lot of those traditional Republicans get cabinet positions because of that. So the vice president, they have a separate office in a separate building from the West Wing. They have no real constitutional authority besides being presiding officer in the Senate, which basically means they just break the ties. If it's ever 50-50, the vice president votes to be 51-50. That's basically all of their presidential role, or their constitutional role. The president can give them more duties. If you guys have ever seen the movie Vice, you see how much George W. Bush gave authority to Dick Cheney when he was vice president. Mike Pence has some authority, but not nearly as much as that, as Cheney was given. Biden had a lot of role, especially when it came to negotiating Obamacare. He helped a lot. It helps being in the Senate for 30 plus years of getting votes. That was his role. Biden did a lot of international relations stuff as well. So for the most part, vice presidents were ignored. They didn't give them a lot of authority. Carter kind of changed this and gave more prestige to the position. So you have the executive office of the White House. In the White House office, you have the communications office that deals with communicating directly to the public and to Congress. You have the press secretary that deals with the press. You have the legislative affairs that deal directly with Congress. Office of Management and Budget, they set the budget and for the entire bureaucracy and government and help organize it and distribute it. National Security Council is there to advise on military matters, and Economic Council advises on the economy. And these are all positioned closely to the president for near immediate advising. So you got the 15 executive departments that are the cabinet. The president has to appoint them. The Senate has to. Aria, stop licking the rug, you weirdo. Sorry, my dog is dumb. They have to be approved by the Senate. The cabinet is more than just advisors now. They actually control the majority of the bureaucracy. There are still 2,000 other positions that the president appoints. These are heads of all the bureaucracy. And nearly 200 ambassadors. There are still countries that Trump hasn't appointed ambassadors to. in 3 years as well. And only about half of these have to be approved by by the Senate. So with the vast size of the bureaucracy and the number of appointees the president has to make, it makes it difficult for the president to be able to directly control all of them and maintain that they are following in the president's interests and fitting towards the policy goals that the president set forward. And there can be clear fights between support towards the agency and support of the president that makes relations between the executive more difficult. And this is especially true with lower appointees that have no communication with the president for the most part. So when it comes to presidents, they have a clear vision that they communicate to the country. Obama ran on hope and change, of making the country work for everyone. Trump ran on Make America Great Again and bringing back the golden era of America in the 50s of production in the United States and having jobs for everyone that were well paid, even with a high school diploma, that no longer exist in today's global economy. This was typified. Ronald Reagan, the United States is the shining city on the hill, a beacon of hope of democracies for the authoritarian controlled world. Political success of the president is also based on congressional approval of the president. If the Congress doesn't want to do anything you want, you're not getting anything done. Bureaucracy has to agree with the president and be willing to put their policies into action. And the judiciary has to approve that it's constitutional in the first place. If the judiciary doesn't agree, then they'll declare it unconstitutional and you're back to square one. So there are still special circumstances that help presidential power be expanded. They have a decisive electoral victory. If they have a clear issue that's going on in the economy or in the world that they deal with that helps boost them. Think of like Lincoln in the Civil War, FDR in the Great Depression, LBJ after JFK's assassination in the Civil Rights era. Ronald Reagan had deep economic troubles that he came into dealing with. Depending on who wins 2020, if Trump is reelected, then Trump will definitely have to be dealing with the aftermath of the coronavirus. And if Joe Biden is elected, you could put his name on this list of dealing with the impact of the quarantine on the economy. But the president isn't the sole decider on everything. This concept that the president is judge, jury, and executioner on policy is incorrect. That there's far more bureaucracy going on involved. So when the president gets in, they have a nice honeymoon period where everyone is more willing to work with them. The public is more supportive of them. They get more nice press going in. This is when they propose a lot of new programs. You need to get those done in your first year because as it goes on, the likelihood of getting policies passed quickly decreases. And this is when you're running low on political resources and all of your momentum is gone. You get more momentum back as you run for re-election and after 4 years. And if you win, then you get another little honeymoon period, but it doesn't last as long and allows for opposition leaders to arise to run against you in the future. We talked about this. President has more power in foreign policy, has way more autonomy than from Congress. They can make tons of executive agreements. The use of military force without direct congressional approval, and working with other executive agencies. And then, because Congress takes forever to do anything, it's important that the United States, or the president, acts. And then and Congress, of course, will have more control over domestic policies in the United States. So, executive agreements, you have far more executive agreements that are signed than treaties, because treaties have to go to Congress and actually voted on. You got to have a pretty good relationship with Congress. The president can set the agenda, but Congress doesn't have to act on it if they don't want to. You try and seek cooperation with Congress to get policies through. Having support from your partisan allies in Congress is key to anything. If your own party disagrees with you, then you're definitely not getting anything done. And having your party controlling both chambers and the presidency definitely help in getting things done. Congress still has abilities to curb the executive power with impeachment and War Powers Act. They can take away the ability to fund war if the president goes into it. And you can see, no real surprise, presidents get things passed more when their party's in control than when they're controlled by the opposing party. So public support is also key. It pretty steadily declines when you're in office. Here's a link to Trump's approval rating. Trump's approval rating is pretty weird because it's never crossed 50%. The highest he's been at is like 45%, and he kind of just zigzags at around 43 to 45%. It's ticked up a little bit recently. He's up at about 45%, which is where he was on Inauguration Day because of the coronavirus. So we'll see if that increases as the election gets closer. You can look at past presidents, and they steadily decline and then jump back up a little bit when they're reelected. W is weird because he declined and then shot dramatically up when 9/11 happened, and then still stair-stepped down all the way to like 27% when he left office because of the economy. And everything that's going on impacts public approval. The better the economy is, the better your approval rating is. That definitely helped Trump for his first 3 years of the state of the economy. Foreign crises like the coronavirus and conflicts can impact it and how a president reacts to it. The president wants to have strong access to the media and setting the agenda. It's a ton of free airtime to the public, and they still, on average, get twice as much coverage as Congress. I'm sure with Trump, it's probably closer to 3 or 4 times that nowadays. And they can go directly to the public to try and get the public opinion backing their policies and going around Congress to force Congress to do as they desire. So there's also a need to counter negative portrayals in the press. This is Trump's attempt at the fake news moniker that he's placed on news outlets that he disagrees with, to try and put a spin on any sort of developments that are going on. And it's pretty hard to disguise adverse developments a lot. The coronavirus is a big one like that. All of the issues Trump has had with coronavirus and calling it a hoax in the past and disagreeing with scientists, those kind of sound bites come to bite him in the butt, especially when it comes to November. I'm sure those sound bites that he had early on in the coronavirus crisis will be played over and over and over again in attack ads in the summer when it gets closer to the election. Public still has very high expectations of the president. They give the president too much credit when things are going well, especially when it comes to the economy, despite the president have very little impact on the economy. If the economy is going well, the president gets more approval, and they get too much blame for when things don't. Trump had very little control on how much the impact of coronavirus had on the economy, but he still got hurt from it. And they got to have a popular base for the presidential power. Trump's not going to lose his 35% anytime soon. That are solidly with him. And you start losing those top levels of less supportive people as your presidency goes on. So that is it. I will see you guys in the next lecture, and hopefully this one recorded, because I would be really frustrated if I have to record this 3 times. But I will see you guys in chapter 13. Okay. And of course,